This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Choose the most unusual matches. Choose the best of the WWF. Choose wrestling's biggest, smallest and strongest. Choose Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Roddy Piper's greatest hits, and wrestling's bloopers, bleeps and body slams. Choose George the Animal Steele. Choose the Ken Patera story. Choose the life and times of Captain Lou Albano. Choose the Hulkamania series. Choose the Ultimate Warrior. And choose Macho Man Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth. Choose WWF World Tour, Smack 'em Whack 'em, and UK Rampages 91, 92 and 93. Choose a journey back in time. Choose Seen Your Video. It's time for everyone to dust off the VCR and plug it back into the television set as we take a trip into the Coliseum Home Video Vault with your host, Rory McNamara.
Joining me this evening as we begin our second year of blowing the dust off Coliseum tapes is my chum and fellow special relation here on the PTBN Network, Mr. Calum McDougall. How are you?
Good evening, Rory. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Always a pleasure, my man. Now, you kicked things off a month. Time flies. A year or so ago. So beginning our second year. So who else could I begin this one with, really? You know.
Oh, but thank you. It was thank you for the special anniversary invite. I can't believe that was a year ago that we spoke about UK Rampage 93. Neil Kinnock, I believe, was mentioned. The 1993-94 Rangers away top, Leeds United. It was many, I think, covered, and I can't believe that was just about a year ago.
Definitely started as we intended to go on.
Of course, yes, as only we can.
Expect more references of that ilk over the next hour or so, ladies and gents. But an important bit of housekeeping before we start. Whilst here in the UK, we do still have access to the WWE Network. Over in the States, the peacock hasn't yet shown us all of its plumage. Hey, do you like that one? Because it's a peacock. Anyway, so these tapes are not yet available by everybody's favourite streaming service of choice, or not of choice, as the case really is. So, as such, I did actually consider putting this project into hiatus for a short while. But then I thought, no, I'm going to keep it going month by month, but with a small caveat. And that is to choose selections in the home video classics section, for which the majority of the matches are readily available elsewhere for the most part, so you can continue to watch along with us. Which, let's face it, should be the point of any wrestling podcast when you think about it. I don't see why anybody would present a show in which the listeners have to jump through hoops merely to see what you are seeing. They, and it's always they, have told us by SummerSlam everything should be up and running on Peacock. And of course, I trust the good burgers of the United States to hold them to that promise. Today was my pick, so it will be very easy to apportion blame. I have gone for 1995's Undertaker, He Buries Them Alive. And how prescient would that title come to be over the next 25 years? Ho, and indeed ho. So, Calum, we are looking at the beginnings of Purple Taker over the course of the next hour. Probably not the most febrile time creatively for Mr. Calloway, but...
Yes, I could see. Well, so I think this tape covers probably about the first few months after he comes back from SummerSlam, probably up into the new year. A slow start is me putting it politely to the next evolution of the Undertaker. And watching these matches, it's hard to believe how people think the American Badass is the worst version of him. But we will. I'll leave it at that, so we don't spoil the rest of the podcast.
Well, I will say this: in my other podcast life, where I am right now on that journey, that iteration of Mr. Taker, you're saying it's not the worst. He's doing his best to disabuse you of that notion where I am right now. But I will agree with you that the Purple Taker runs it close. Let's say that.
Well, yeah, the American Badass. I mean, if you put the American Badass and Purple Taker next to each other, it certainly is a race to the bottom, because he does try. I do agree with you. He does try his damnedest to stink up the place.
Just before we get started, that's an interesting point. Is it fair to say, I mean, it's 30 years, so it's going to be skewed fairly heavily in one direction, but Undertaker, he's a bit shit, really, isn't he? You do think, maybe it's just me. Again, I'm not exactly impartial on this score, but you do think of the bad more readily than you think of the good. Is that reasonable enough to say?
Yes and no, I think. It's difficult. I've got a note further on about that very thing. If you look what he had to put up with before, before he became the Lord of Darkness in like 98, 99 time, he wasn't dealt a very good hand with who he had to face. And then 98, 99, you had the Lord of Darkness, you had the Ministry, which was very well remembered, but more for outside of the ring purposes, like the Black Wedding and all that sort of thing. Again, was producing stuff that was less than stellar in the ring. And he probably only really got good when he started his MMA dead man, really. I can't think of many outstanding matches other than obviously he says having put the Undertaker in his greatest WWE match of all time ballot at number 1. But other than that, when he's in with guys like Shawn, before a certain point in time, you were edging. You would probably see his matches sort of edging towards the bottom of the barrel, as opposed to the cream of the crop, as a Macho Man would say.
Also, very much worth noting that MMA Taker took place exactly halfway through his career, which in more ways than one is quite the statistic.
Yeah, so what was it they were celebrating this Survivor Series this year? Was it 30 years of the Undertaker? So it would have been 2020. So 30 years of the Undertaker. It took him 15 years to have anything close to a good run, potentially. So there are arguments either way for him being a bit shit or one of the best of all time. Certainly the best character, I think, of all time, or one of. But I am going to get I am probably going to get a small splinter in the rear end, because I'm just probably going to sit in the fence on this one.
As ever, Calum. Switzerland to the last, eh?
Absolutely.
Just call him Stefan Chapuisat. And there is our first football reference.
Yes.
Minutes and 45 seconds. Callum, we're slacking.
I know, it's shocking, but we think we're slacking, but we bring out a Stefan Chapuisat to even it out. So I mean, you've gone big there early doors, Mr. McNamara.
I think we need to get started, don't you?
I think it might be wise.
We know our audience too well.
$1 million man Ted DiBiase here, taking time out of my busy schedule to host The Undertaker. He buries him alive. You know, I'll give credit where credit is due. The Undertaker is truly one of the greatest superstars ever in the World Wrestling Federation. I mean, I should know. I'm the one who originally brought him to the WWF in the first place. Well, we put together a collection of some of the Dark One's greatest matches ever, including our first match, The Undertaker taking on my man, The Undertaker. I know it's confusing. I'm still confused. Well, anyway, let's take a look.
So, you will have heard Ted DiBiase there, man of the moment, you might say, on the 28th of April 2021, but no matter. Probably slightly more at place where he was on NXT this week than he was introducing a video about The Undertaker. I suppose we will see him for the next 10-15 minutes in the opening match, but otherwise, I can think of at least one other person who might have been on hand to present this, considering there is actually a Paul Bearer hosted Coliseum video lurking in the vault for me to do at one point in the future. Now, was he busy at this point? Or did he actually have an urgent embalming to take care of? Right?
I would like to think so. Like they phoned him up and he goes, Vince McMahon phones him up and goes, Paul, we need you for a Coliseum home video. He goes, I'm busy that day.
Is there actually a time limit on when you can embalm somebody?
I don't know. I've never tried, to be honest.
Oh, there goes my follow-up question. Anyway, Darcy introduces us to this video. He only has 3 links. He makes a right horlicks of the second one, which we will get to. But starting strong and all that, we begin with the aforementioned SummerSlam 1994 main event. Undertaker versus Undertaker. Full disclosure, this comes from my second most watched event of all time in SummerSlam 94. Yes, I know. My number one most watched event? WrestleMania 11. I know. I really, really do know. This one goes 9 minutes after the full intros. The only time on the video, interestingly, we get the Undertaker entrance. I must say, without wanting to lead anybody in any special direction for about 50 minutes time, the real Undertaker's entrance here is quite something. Probably one of the very finest. Some of his critics, and I count myself among that number more often than I don't, would say that Undertaker has always been 85% entrance. I think it's nearing 100, but it's not a criticism. It does make up for the 9 minutes of action we are then treated to. It ends after Undertaker, the real one, hits 3 tombstone pile drivers on poor old hapless Mr. Brian Lee. Thank you, good night. I don't recall saying good luck. And normal service is resumed. Calum, school of thought that this is the worst WWF pay-per-view main event up to that point, or at least since the last one, just 2 months before, and maybe another one 3 months after we'll be talking about, but no matter. Does it still plumb those depths for you now, 27 years on?
Yes, I mean, up to that point, absolutely. I mean, and even since that point, you will be hard pressed to find one that's worse than this. I mean, they did really well building this up, but they've managed to build up a match that nobody wanted to see. It was everything built to that first stare down, and nobody cared. So they've built a match that people wanted to see the start of, but didn't necessarily want to see the conclusion of. Very, very strange. It was all very strange that they built to the stare down. And so they've done all this work with Brian Lee to make sure he had all Undertaker's mannerisms and they had all his moves and it made him look like the Undertaker. They copied everything down to the tattoo, but they couldn't put risers in his boots to make him the same height. No one checked that they were the same height. And so that was the first thing, or maybe they did it on purpose to make it look as if, to show that Ted DiBiase had a fake when they were up against each other. But everything built to that first stare down, and nobody really cared about anything after it.
No, that's a really interesting point, that this didn't really need to be a match. Because if there was any doubt, even amongst the very few marks in that Chicago audience, and they're at a premium anyway at the best of times, but the very second Paul Bearer gets that huge urn and the light comes out of it, and the remixed version, the one we would become very familiar with, of Undertaker's music, still not his all-time best, never mind. As soon as that strikes up, the mystery is solved. Even ahead of Leslie Nielsen, the mystery is solved about 20 minutes before he could do it. Now, that's the real Undertaker, and we can now all go home. Everybody knew that anyway, that Ted DiBiase was an imposter. Just have Mr. Calloway hit a tombstone and good night. Instead, we got a 9-minute match. Even if you overlook the awful quality of the technical aspects of this match, such you can call them. I mean, there's a stun gun in this match. How do you get a stun gun wrong, for goodness sake? It's just falling backwards. It's completely clothesline. It looks terrible. All of that more than factors into the Dodder-Rooney that we've got here. But it just didn't need to happen anyway. The crowd didn't want to see them wrestle. Just have it over and done with. This crowd have been treated to a 35-minute wrestling match beforehand, which a true emotional roller coaster they've been on right there. They've got nothing left for this nonsense. The smarks in the crowd can see right through it, and the marks just don't care anymore anyway, because their 3-month mystery was decided on 5 minutes ago. We don't need to go any further than that. Just draw a line under it and move on. Undertaker was going to be rusty. The Undertaker was going to be rusty after 7 months anyway, and boy, did it show. I did like Vince on commentary calling them Paul Bearer's Undertaker and Ted DiBiase's Undertaker, pronouns, pal. As if they're Mike Love's Beach Boys and Brian Wilson's Beach Boys. I definitely got that in the wrong order. You say what you will about Vince on play-by-play, but he has got 2 golden moments during this match. Number one, the crowd are in awe of this thing. They don't know what to think. Reckon they do, Vinny. Reckon they do.
Yeah, they know exactly what to think.
All-time classic Vince McMahon call. Fake Undertaker hits a tombstone pile driver. And my friend Scott Keith says he loves shoot comments that are not meant to be shoot comments. Vince comes out with the following pearl. Nothing is happening. He really does follow move by move action after orders, Vinnie Mac.
But I mean, that's the thing. So you've got a guy who you've built this character up, the Undertaker, where everything's slow and methodical. The last thing you want to do is make a carbon copy of that. So you've got two slow and methodical guys in the ring.
Yeah.
I mean, along with the incredible knack that they've made a match where people want to see the start as opposed to the end. They've made the Chicago crowd completely silent. That's worse. I've got a note here that I'm being the King of the Ring 95 truther that I am. That's worse than King of the Ring 95 because at least the Philadelphia crowd had an opinion on it. It wasn't a good opinion of it, but it still had an opinion on it. The people there didn't care.
Unless it was a very meta gag on the part of the Chicago crowd that they were going to be dead as well. Dig in the ribs.
I mean, quite possibly. I mean, well, was it
put it past them? Let's say that.
Was it like hashtag hijack Raw when it comes to Chicago with CM Punk chants? They just went hashtag before it's time. Hashtag what would the AOL chat room equivalent be? At AOL chat room hijack SummerSlam 94.
Yeah, I don't think they had the word recognition software back in 1994, so they probably would have been okay to do that. Even Vladimir looked bored during that match, and that takes some doing, let me assure you.
I know, yeah, I mean, it could, as you said, it could have been a segment. It didn't need to have, why not have Brian Lee come out and, I don't know, beat someone before back on Brett, and then have the Undertaker come out after that, chokeslam him, tombstone, do whatever you want, put him in the casket, send him packing. You didn't need to end a pay-per-view, like your second biggest pay-per-view of the year or third biggest pay-per-view of the year. You didn't need to end it with that.
The match doesn't have any even internal logic either. You can't even use that in its defense because there's no reason the real Undertaker would want to wrestle him anyway. It doesn't prove anything.
No.
Just because he has beaten him in a wrestling match doesn't itself prove he is the real Undertaker. They're just lucky that was established 10 minutes beforehand.
Yeah, and then if you go by the fact that it's a sport, what happens if he gets beat? He gets beat by an imitation of himself. You're right. There's no need to have this match at all.
It's like when SmackDown defeated Raw in that 7-on-7 tag match in Bragging Rights 2009. Now there's a reference.
That's a deep cut there, Rory.
Not one of my finest. This proves that SmackDown have a dominant brand. No, it doesn't. What the fuck does it? Even in the kayfabe, it doesn't mean that.
It just meant that Raw were unlucky enough to have picked somebody in their team that couldn't kick out couldn't stay down for less than 3 seconds.
Precisely. More on that in 8.5 years on the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast.
I can't wait. I love Bragging Rights.
I was lucky for the sneak preview there. But yes, talk about Bragging Rights 2009 rather than the main event of SummerSlam 1994. Well, obviously. Yeah, it is worse than Piper and Lawler from 2 months before, because I do think the two of them were at least trying in that match, and they probably were both aware that they really shouldn't have been in that spot. Brett himself would disagree, obviously, but I can see why this was given main event billing. And it just didn't suit it in any way. Although this has just clicked with me now, Calum. If this same thing had happened now in April 2021, God forbid, this would have been the 35-minute match.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you had... Who would be the equivalent just now? Oh, for the love of God. It would be Bray Wyatt versus Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt versus The Fiend. And it would go 35 minutes. And it'll be...
At some point, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it will. I mean, and it's just, at least they had the mercy of, you know, putting it out first on WrestleMania, the Fiend and Randy Orton, and keeping it to 5 minutes. I feel bad for, to be honest, I feel bad for Randy Orton having to put up with this for the last year. But yeah, there's Piper and Lawler had at least some redeeming quality in the fact that you had Roddy Piper in the ring because he's a big name, and he's sort of a living legend at that point. This had no redeeming qualities whatsoever. There's not even one thing that you could point out that makes it any way watchable. It had just nothing going for it at all.
Yeah, it's just a pure slog. Piper v Lawler strays into so, maybe not so bad it's good, but so amusingly poor it's watchable. No, this didn't even have any accidental nuisance value. It was just a very poor wrestling match under the auspices of a dreadful storyline.
Was JR still with the company at this point?
I think so.
So he always talks on these podcasts. I don't even know if he did any input in creative, but Jim Cornette was there. So you've got to think the guys like that always think about you start from the end and work your way back, and that's what they allegedly do with WrestleMania. They start at WrestleMania 1 year and then they work all their way back for almost a whole year, allegedly. This seems like somebody had a good idea. Like Vince had a good idea at one point. He said, "What if we have the Undertaker against the Undertaker?" Oh, that's brilliant, boss, wonderful. And they had no concept of how they were going to get there and how they would pay it off. They just wanted to basically, I think they just wanted a poster to have the Undertaker versus the Undertaker.
To relegate poor old Brett to the bottom bar.
I mean, maybe it's just to spite Brett. I mean, who knows?
More than likely. I suppose we should be thankful for minor mercies. Very, very, very minor mercies. Bruce Pritchard, yeah, again, I know, has told the story that the original plan, such but it was at the end of this match, was for the two Undertakers to merge into one. Now, I shudder to think how they were planning on doing that. Just 1994 production values, CGI was just a figment of even Deluxe Paint 3 was probably the best you were going to get at that point. The methods they might have had to do so, I really don't want to sit here and consider.
No, that seems. That might have been your redeeming quality of this match, though, for the complete hokiness at the end.
Not true. Well, I think we'll leave Brian Lee and Mark Calloway merging for the realms of fan fiction and move swiftly on.
Yes, before we go completely off the rails here and go in a completely different direction. So
we cut away very quickly from that match because you wouldn't you? And we go to our second from a couple of weeks later, a Raw taping as aired on September 1994 against Quang. And Scott Keith doing very well for himself out of the show so far. To borrow another of his classic lines, what's the sound of 300 pounds of crap hitting the mat? Quang. Other than this being the BSK representing on an edition of Raw, there's very, very little to talk about here. Quang gets in a couple of kicks, which of course Vince calls as a what a maneuver. He's back. And Undertaker eventually wins with the choke slam. Remember that for a few minutes' time. Calum, if you can glean anything from this, you're a finer man than I.
I have managed to get a note out of this.
Yeah.
This is okay. But after his triumphant return at SummerSlam, should The Undertaker be having a semi-competitive match with Quang? Probably not.
Okay, maybe, I'll tell you.
That's probably, I mean, I'm assuming that's the only reason that Quang got any offence or as much offence as he did. It's always nifty to see a missed spot, even if it's not towards anybody. It's a nice visual if you the wee red mist in the air. Or is it the red spew that Vince kept calling it on commentary? But yeah, there was nothing much. It was a standard television match, if not slightly too competitive for your big triumphant return to the ring on Raw for the Undertaker. I imagine, because I'm thinking this must be his first match on Raw since he came back. after, and then Raw might have been preempted for the dog show or whatnot. So you've had very little Raw or sighting of the Undertaker since then, and he has your next one is he's having a match with Quang. I don't, but it was better than what we had before.
I think this is why this era of the Undertaker is so poorly. Well, it's remembered well enough, but not exactly in glowing terms, because this is it. They really have nothing for him at this point, and this tape doesn't go there. But through 1995, he is spinning his wheels. I'm not even gonna, for the risk of brain implosion, I'm not going to list the names of the people he's feuding with after this tape for the remainder of 95. But it's very, very slim pickings at best. And straight after the Undertaker match, this is what they've got for him. I mean, I suppose you could, if you really wanted to be charitable about it, you could say that already they entered Undertaker straight into the special attraction realm, where he remains for probably a good 18 months until Mr. Foley comes along. And that's fine, but it doesn't make for much in the way of compelling television. What storylines can you do with this fella other than having his own being stolen?
Well, yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I get it. I absolutely get what you're saying. I completely agree with you that he's moved into special attraction, because he's gone from big man to big man, having matches on every pay-per-view that are spectacles more than anything else. So you've got your 2 matches with Giant Gonzalez, and you've got Yoko, even though you've got what comes after it with the urn and all that sort of thing. He's very, very rarely in the WWF Championship picture, other than that one with Yokozuna. And when would be the next time that he has you're probably right, it's after, between now and the end of the Mankind run. That'd be the first time that he probably gets a meaningful championship match. It would be Final 497, and that's only by circumstance.
Well, he has his match with Brett Royal Rumble 96, but yeah, you can't. Really...
of course, yeah.
That's meaningful only for JT's magnificent description of that as a refrigerator match.
and how many times can you go to the refrigerator in 35 minutes? You could get absolutely shit faced if going to the refrigerator at the amount of times you could in that match.
Even after 35 minutes, I'd say that even the last cheese string at the back looks wildly advanced.
Yeah, the one that you forgot was there.
Best before February 2012. Yeah, okay. We cleaned our fridge out last week. Thank you very much. Well, somebody in this house cleaned our fridge out.
I'm not going to make a guess as to who that was, Rory. I'm not brave enough.
Because you don't need to, do you?
I'm not brave enough to say it out
loud. You can take the Bachelor out of the boy, etc. Anyway. So yeah, this is a match against Quang on Raw, and it does go to show how meaningless Raw was at this time and how far it had drifted from its supposed moorings. In 1993, early 93, it was a relatively exciting show, merely by dint of just existing, because it was live and it was uncooked and uncensored and all of that. Here, it's probably not too fanciful to suggest it's probably still kind of the B show. So I would say that the big storylines are still really happening on Superstars rather than Raw. I did a scoot of some of the results of Raw from late 94 into early 95. This is the type of thing we're getting for about 4-6 months on the spin. And obviously they were very much unopposed on Monday nights at this point and would be for another good year, but tell you what, probably just as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that. I mean, the closest thing they've got to competition would be Saturday night, but even Superstars was a Saturday morning show. But I mean, you can tell exactly why they were, like, their crowds were as low as they were for having like matches. Like, if this is what you're putting on your brand new show. And it was, and thinking about it, it's almost as if they didn't really know what they wanted to do with. They had no real focus on any of the shows, because you've got the Action Zone tag match, which is obviously an Action Zone. They've got Raw on Monday night on prime time. on the USA Network, which is like one of the biggest networks in the country, and you're doing stuff like this on it, and then you've got all your shows happening on, all your big stories are happening on Superstars and potentially Challenge, but they're on a Saturday and a Sunday morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very bizarre.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. I think that's right. This is probably a discussion for another day on another podcast. But I want to say that the idea of Monday Night Raw itself actually came together fairly quickly. I think it's not far before the end of 1992 that Raw was eventually put on the tape.
Yes, I think so. I think you're probably right, because I again, good friend Bruce Pritchard, who's I do listen to him sometimes, because on shows that I think might be relatively interesting, heaven forbid. He mentioned Raw, and I think was it late '92, not roughly the time that they were going to go to their weekly pay-per-view?
Yes,
and it got canned. So they just decided to change prime time into what they were make this weekly pay-per-view. Imagine paying $9.99 for the Undertaker against Kwang. So yeah, I think the whole concept of Raw, I think you're absolutely right. I think it did come together quite sharpish.
But it did mean mining matches for 60-minute long Coliseum videos put out on short play tapes. That was actually fairly easy to do.
Oh, absolutely. As evidence here.
Absolutely. Let's move on again, but not without alerting everybody to Ted DiBiase's mistake, where he says that Kwang was no match for the Undertaker's mighty tombstone. The tombstone he didn't even hit in this match. Some might say that DiBiase was just given these links 2 minutes before he was planning on walking out the door after a long TV taping and didn't really care to see if they were accurate or not. I don't know.
Well, I mean, he's not telling a lie, because if he's no match for the chokeslam, he certainly wasn't a match for the tombstone.
Defending the rich to the last night, Calum.
I was talking my way out of that one. Quote another show on the Place to Be Nation Wrestling Network.
Noted. I'll drop the B-bomb, the bourgeois, next time on our next edition of Special Relations. Got a challenge there. Let's get to our third match, which inexplicably is not the main event of this tape. Very annoying thing on these videos I've noticed over the last year, where they have a propensity to just not put matches in chronological order. Very, very weird. But yes, our third match is Survivor Series 94 and the blow-off against Yokozuna. I believe this match is clipped, because Survivor Series 94 and other VHS I have watched far too many times in my misspent youth. Seems to be a moment where Yoko is on offense, then the screen goes white for a brief second. King Kong Bundy comes down to try his luck against Chuck Norris, who is the special enforcer, and Undertaker is magically back on the offensive. So I do think they cut a couple of minutes. Not that I'm going to try to seek them out again anytime soon. So I've seen this match far, far too often. Calum, this was the one that finished off the 10-month feud. Again, poor old Brett relegated to the mid-card for this one, main eventing the pay-per-view. What are your thoughts on this casket match?
I always like watching Yokozuna, because there's not, again, redeeming quality here. Yokozuna in any match is always fascinating to watch, because even at the size he is just now, in this match, and that wouldn't be as big as he would have as we know, he's still really, really good for the size of a man that he is, and I find that completely fascinating. I didn't put my first note on this one is, at this point you're seeing why a compilation on the Undertaker around this time isn't a good idea, because he's only allowed to wrestle in one way, and even Yokozuna being the trooper that he is isn't going to save that. I mean, Yoko can bump really well, but he can bump really well, but he probably shouldn't be, given what his character is. But he was doing some excellent stooging when he was he gave himself up and then fell on his arse because he was all dizzy and didn't know where he was. I thought that was excellent. just when you think the match is starting to tail off and sort of you're thinking, right, time to wrap this up, boys. You know, the wonderful Mr. Excitement Irwin R. Shyster comes into the ring and immediately does a sleeper hold, and you're thinking, well, what a way to get everyone back on side with this one.
With Mr. Shyster.
It's like, well, what? We'll do a run, and we'll get IRS to run in, and he's like, yes, here we go, and he's full of beans, and he's coming in, he's like, yeah, and then completely forgets that his only move's a sleeper hold. He's like, oh, Christ, here we go. But I mean, it was the best thing we've seen so far, and damning with faint praise. But yeah, I mean, it was all right. In the grand scheme of things, it was okay.
You do get to see Jeff Jarrett selling a super kick from Chuck Norris head first, so there is that.
I mean, it was yes. He was trying to do it head first and then into a headstand. Wonderful stuff. And then you see him like running away. Didn't even. What a selling point for your soon-to-be WWF Intercontinental Champion. Takes one super kick from an actor and then is sprinting down the aisle, never to be seen again for the rest of the match.
Oh, never to be seen for the rest of the match. Okay, never to be seen again. Chance would be a fine thing. Looking at some of the match listings on a lot of tapes for 94-95, Mr. Jarrett rears his ugly head and ugly mullet, as if there's any other kind, unless you're Pat Sharp.
Absolutely.
For comfort, so I'll make sure you accompany me for those ones, Calum. I think it's only fair.
Well, I look forward to it because the one thing I see when I see Jeff Jarrett is, isn't he great?
He most certainly is not. Jeff Jarrett. I mean, our own Bob Bamber of the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast once said that Jeff Jarrett is probably the most fascinating career of almost any wrestler in history. And I think he's right. Especially of the drain factor of how fucking dull Jarrett actually is. The amount of things you can talk about with Jarrett. That ratio shouldn't add up.
Well, I listened to a podcast before. I can't remember if it was on this fine feed or it might be on the Wrestling 20 Years Ago, out of timeline, obviously, or maybe in timeline actually. Jeff Jarrett always seems to like fall up the way. So he walks out of the WWF, or so the USWA finishes, and then, or is on its last legs, he ends up getting a job with the WWF. Doesn't like his contract there, or doesn't like, I can't remember the circumstances he left in '95, but he wasn't happy, and then, bails out of there in early '96 after his Ahmed issue, his Ahmed run. So he bails out of WWF, becomes a horseman. Yeah. Becomes the second most boring horseman like after Paul Roma, gets booted out of WCW, comes back in a fairly high profile position in the WWF, holds Vince McMahon up for £200,000, bails from there, and then becomes the WCW World Champion within 6 months. The guy has extremely good luck.
Locking in, I think, is what they say.
I think so.
Yeah. What is it? Was it the old Ian Holloway line? If he fell into a vat of nipples, he'd come out sucking his thumb. Not sure.
Absolutely not.
So Stefan Shetty and Ian Holloway were doing not bad so far.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's good and sort of diverse even for us on football in terms.
Very odd brand of us as well. I suppose I should talk about this match. Yeah, it is okay, and I don't mind the Royal Rumble 94 match until the nonsense, as we will call it. I think it's perfectly serviceable, and I have a very similar match here, right down to Undertaker's swinging DDT thing that he should have done more often. That's a bloody good move.
Oh yeah.
It takes a lot for me to praise Mr. Calloway in ring, but that swinging DDT was bloody marvellous, I should say. Should have done that far more often, I should say. I did just say. It did go on too long. And talk about Yoko's selling in that match, Calum, and I do agree with you. He was great at it. His facial expressions, tremendous. Clearly put a lot behind them. But this is it with Vince and big men in particular when he's finished with them. Yokozuna was WWF champion not long before this. And I know in the build-up for their match at the early part of the year, he was scared of caskets. But here you've got him freaking out when he sees it. Here you've got him just falling over. Here you've got him in the middle of the ring thinking he's near the ropes and then collapsing onto that ample backside of his. Talk about Vince McMahon. He rides the horse and then he eats the horse. And here he is eating Yokozuna. Quite a thought, I know, but it was too goofball. As great as Mr. Anoa'i was at playing that, it didn't look remotely a threat. But then I suppose that was the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think have you watched any of the? I know it was on the network for a time. The unreleased compilation that they did.
I have not seen that. No, I really would like to go.
No. There's one match in it in particular that I thought was a completely missed opportunity, and everyone talks about how crap Diesel's WWF Championship run was, but they had a match on there from I want to say it wouldn't be early '96 because he lost it. It must have been late '95, and they had Diesel and Yoko in a cage. It was like a dark match. I was thinking that's a missed opportunity. I mean, the match wouldn't be. I don't think the match would be overly good, but Nash has some redeemable qualities sometimes. Yoko could, as I've said, could still go even to the bitter end at a reasonably good level. But at that point in mid to late '95, he's been reduced to a tag worker probably because they've got his issues with his health. But you can't tell me that if you'd kept Yoko reasonably strong, that you couldn't have had a throwaway in your house defence with Diesel and Yoko, even if it's in a cage to sort of hide some of the deficiencies. But you're absolutely right. They've sort of milked him as much as they wanted, and they've just done. They just like he becomes a sideshow, and it happens more and more over the years. The more like a recent one or a more recent one would be they did the same with Dolph Ziggler. So they built him up for a year as Mr. Money in the Bank. He had everyone was choking for him to cash it in. They had the epic cash in the night after WrestleMania. He gets himself in so they lose the belts and he's lost the belt and has done absolutely nothing since because they just don't care about him anymore. They milked him for that one moment, then it was going to be his run, and that was it. And they've done it. So he's good. I think we should now dub this the Yoko treatment. Copyright Rory McNamara 2021.
Thank you. There you go. I was going to share that with you, but there we are.
No. I mean, I can't. I'm not at a level to share something with a podcast legend, Rory. Come on, don't even suggest such a thing.
Really are unprompted. We don't talk about when the PL reference is going to be dropped during these shows. Calum does this off his own steam. I don't lean on him in any way, shape, or form.
Not at all. Because when you're in the midst of greatness, you've got to appreciate it. And yes, unprompted always.
Oh, you. Just one more thing on this match. The very end of it, where Undertaker snatches Mr. Fuji's Japanese flag, snaps it, and throws it into the casket. Knowing what we now know about the protagonist, probably less of a surprise than it seemed at the time.
I thought exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder who made sure that one was written into the end.
Very, very strange to see from a man who has, from parts unknown. So, I mean, I don't know what the diplomatic relationships between parts unknown and Japan are. Obviously very poor by the looks of things. But, yeah, very, very strange, but very on brand as we've come to find out.
Oh, dear. Was anybody really surprised? Please don't. Yeah, I've said before, I'll say it one more time. I really do miss the days when Undertaker was, quote, notoriously protective of his character, unquote. Now we know a lot more about his character than I would ever care to, if you know what I mean. So there's the match for Yokozuna. Puts a bow on that one. Very nice. Yokozuna back to the mid-card, and Undertaker's going to continue in his 1995. But again, still 2 matches to go from before Survivor Series 94. I don't know why they couldn't just put them in order, but we go back just 3 days to a Superstars taping match against Jim Neidhart, of all people. Rather motley opponent for Mr. Taker. This one goes about 5-6 minutes. Owen Hart does the lion's share of work in this match, as you would expect. Jim gets spooked by the casket, which would make a lot more sense if it was before the match we've just seen, and then just toddles off to take the count-out loss. Calum, your thoughts?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. A 6-minute match, and the best thing about it was one of the guys' managers. Owen was superb throughout this whole thing. Unfortunately, I mean, disappointingly, Owen wasn't the man in the ring with Undertaker. We might have saw something that was even resembled good. And yeah, I've got a note as well. I mean, strange that they were. You see the casket match, and then you immediately cut with like literally just a hard cut from that match to this one. No DiBiase in between. And the first thing you hear in commentary is them talking about the match that we've just seen. Yeah, very bizarre, and you'll have picked this up a lot more than I have, given that you've been doing this show now for a year. Yeah, it was very, very strange. And my other note on this one, again, I'm lucky that I managed to get 2 notes out of this match, was this is almost as if they were pulling the tape together and they're like, right, so we've got to get you know, the SummerSlam match in and the Survivor Series match in. Okay, right, we'll put his first match back on Raw, and then we've got the last match that we're going to see, and I think, oh fuck, this match, this is only like 50 minutes, right? We'll need to find another match that will just stick on to bring this up to closer to an hour. And they've just plucked this one out of thin air. Like, oh, right, we need another 5-10 minutes. Oh, right, there's a match that's 6 minutes long. Stick that on. Yeah, a bizarre positioning on the tape and just a bizarre choice of a match as well.
It does make you think they threw these together very, very quickly and without much in the way of editing software. That they could have, if they just thought we've got 10 minutes spare, we can stick on the match with Neidhart and the following match on this tape on at the end of it, then they could have slotted them into the middle of it. But, you know, Coliseum video lead times in 1995 and all of that probably precluded them from doing so. They just put them in that order. I don't know. There must be some reason for it. It's not as if this tape's thematical, such as something like Super Tape that we talked about a couple of months ago, where the matches being shown out of chronological sequence makes sense because there is a perfectly explained reason for them being so, because you're focusing on a particular wrestler for the next half an hour or a style of match, whatever. It's just Undertaker matches from late 1994 built around a closing casket match. And one of those matches that you've stuck after it is obviously part of the build to that match. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it was all very strange. And then, but you've got the thing is, like, their thought process must have been. Do you know what? I don't even know if there was a thought process put in it, as you say, because it's just so you've got the SummerSlam match. The first match that we see has a full entrance on it, and then they've obviously thought, right, we'll put these other 2 matches on. We can put full entrances on for those. But then they're thinking, right, okay, that's us close to an hour. We've only got 3 matches. Can we really ship this for $14 or $20, whatever they were going to do it for? And then they're thinking, right, we need to stick more matches on, so we'll bring it up to 5. All right, we've gone too far now, and they've just chopped all the entrances out.
That's very probably it. As I say, these short play tapes, 10 a penny, maybe not.
I don't know. I mean, is there not the wee thing on the recorder that we used to get, where you could change you could basically convert your short play tape into a long play tape by pressing the button, and it was just
dropping down a generation of quality there, though. Believe me, I've tried it.
Yes, that is true. That is true. You can.
I want to say it was WrestleMania 2000. We had a 2-hour tape, and it wasn't a new one. We taped millions of things of that, but 2-hour tape, and we taped it on long play, knowing WrestleMania 16 was going to go long. And when we watched the tape back the next day, it was unwatchable. I know you've already made that joke, but I mean the quality of the videotape. I don't mind WrestleMania 2000. It's all right. WrestleMania, that's the problem with it.
It is what it is.
It's a fine show. It's just not a WrestleMania at all.
No.
I like the fact we've talked about another event after virtually every match so far. So that's five to a final.
Yeah, I think we've talked more about if you've come here, folks, wanting to hear stuff about the Undertaker buries them alive. He buries them alive. Watch the tape and you'll realise why we've actually spoken about like other things more than we've spoken about the tape.
Source material lends itself to tangential discussion. Let's leave it at that.
Yes.
But we do have one more match to talk about, and that is a Coliseum video exclusive. We have to have one, so this one you might need to wait for this one to become available on the network to dig out. I know, sorry. Against Jerry the King Lawler. And this one is very notable. It comes from a very famous taping of White Plains, New York in September 94. So again, we're going back in time. So a match Calum may or may not have mentioned earlier occurred on this taping. One we equally may or may not be discussing on a future episode of Seeing Your Video in maybe just a month's time. So watch out for that. Also, this played host to the first Action Zone main event, the excellent match between Bret Hart and Owen Hart, which you can find on Bret's The Best There Is, Best There Was, Best There Is DVD. I strongly recommend you do. It's a pared down version of the WrestleMania 10 match, I would say. So as such, still very much an easy 4 stars. Very, very worth 50 minutes of your time. But again, we're not here to discuss that. It's shtick-based mid-1994 Jerry Lawler. He just felt so out of place in the WWF. Lawler did at this time. I almost don't think him of ever being a wrestler there. I know he had some notable moments, certainly the year before this, middle of 95, if you're being really, really charitable. But I just think of Lawler as a commentator first and foremost with the WWF. I doubt I'm alone in that. His 80s smoky bar heel gambits, they worked in that arena because that's what they were created for. Here, when he's just stooging off the Undertaker for 10 minutes, it really doesn't work for me. And this one was a mercy killing, pun intended, when he was stuffed into the casket after, at least this time, a Tombstone pile driver. Calum, what do you got?
Yeah, again, I completely agree with you with the whole Lawler thing. It was plenty of stooging that he's probably known for from his Memphis days, and the stooging and the stalling and the I'm trying to think of something else to make it sound like it's a Wizard of Oz thing, with the stooging and the stalling and the everything else. But it doesn't work when you're facing the Undertaker. And again, it goes back to the style of match. Another issue with the style of match that the Undertaker has to wrestle for this, for the gimmick. It's the slow and plodding style up against the Memphis style that Lawler knows and loves. It doesn't work, and it was very, very bizarre. And I know that like these I don't understand why this match even came about. If I'm honest, I don't understand why the Undertaker would all of a sudden have such an issue with Jerry Lawler that they have to have a casket match.
Well, these Coliseum video exclusives are very random pairings. And it's a selling point for this a special podcast talking about matches you wouldn't normally hear about, but a curious combination nevertheless, even by those standards.
Well, yes, you're quite right. This is the sort of the prototype of match that you will be talking about on the show. So yeah, for that point, I can see that point I can see why we'll love matches like this. But it was all very, very, very strange, and it was again just another miss on it. Although one thing I will say, the best of X that they put on the network or Peacock, I'm sure they will have, because they've got the best of Ronda Rousey on, cashing in on her news this week. You know, ever the pop cut up to date with pop culture and stuff like that. Still cashing in on Ronda Rousey. It would be interesting if they did things like you had an exclusive, a best of collection exclusive match, almost like your Coliseum exclusive, because some of them will be quite good, I imagine. Not necessarily this one though.
I still maintain that the best quote-unquote surprise Coliseum video exclusive match we've seen so far, for me anyway, was Mr. Perfect v Ronnie Garvin from the Super Tape 1. That's doing well today. Go back and check out that one. I mention it almost as often on here as I actually have on that one, but never mind. Really fine. Excluding all the usual suspects like the Brett and Shawn matches, whatever. Really, really fine. This one does not deserve to lace the boots of that match, I'm afraid, and you would trip over them even if you tried. Not very good here. Far too long. Undertaker also wrestled Mike Bell on this taping as well, apparently.
I'm sure that was a barn burner.
Who I believe would go down, very much literally go down in infamy as the person being beaten up in the ring by Perry Saturn 7 years later.
Oh yes, so he was.
That'll be him.
Yeah. Wow, that's a hell of a story arc for Mike Bell in the WWF.
Wait till I get up. Well, yeah, it was 2001, so we'll get to that on the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. I'm interested to read the news surrounding that one.
Well, certainly for content.
That's on at the time.
Since you've lost WCW and ECW, and I even in our special relations group chat, you've been very everly professional. No spoilers coming out on what the new Wrestling 20 Years Ago content's going to be, but I am hoping that you may use some YouTube from well-known YouTube accounts to maybe get matches from Jacked and Metal, and maybe we will get a review like the weekend roundup from Wrestling 20 Years Ago to replace WCW or ECW. My fingers are well and truly crossed for that, Mr. McNamara. Just
oh, there we are. I'll put that one to the people. Well, I am the people, so there we go. Consider it put to.
You are. I wait with bated breath. I hope I'm not too late for April.
No, not recorded yet. We'll the April show the day this recording goes out.
Oh, so there's still time, right? I'm right. My fingers and now my toes are well and truly crossed. Here we go. We will get the match report of Mike Bell versus Perry Saturn one day.
Guaranteed. But we have business to wrap up here. Again, much like every single tape we've talked about in the course of this project, they go off the air very, very quickly. But they do use Deluxe Paint 2 one more time for a little tombstone that has "Rest in Peace" written on it. See? Do you see what they did there? Do you see? Yeah, never mind. So, Calum, I hate to be the person to do this to you, but rules are rules. It's time to hand out some awards. I did honestly think, this is absolutely true, I did genuinely think about skipping them on this occasion, but it's part of the fun, isn't it? So, are you ready for this one?
Yes.
Rewind. The best, B-E-S-T, best match or segment. How much to choose from?
Yes, well, I think it will need to be Taker Yoko. It will need to be the Yoko casket match.
Yes, the in-ring was what it was, but at least it had a purpose. It carried it out, and it put the full stop, the period mark at the end of it. So, and we got to talk about Jeff Jarrett for 5 minutes. Okay, despite that, yeah, still best match. Rewind. Not that I really want to rewind it and say I've seen that match front to back far too many times as it is, as I care to mention. But we are where we are. Best match is Undertaker versus Yokozuna from Survivor Series 94. Fast forward, I think I know where we're going with this one. Our worst match or segment.
I mean, yeah. Even on this tape, the worst one has got to be SummerSlam 94.
Would it be any better if you did actually watch it on fast forward?
Quite possibly. I mean, I did like ever the professional that I am, I didn't once use the plus 10 seconds on the network. Even watching it fast forward, it was still probably go at a glacial pace.
Yeah, very much the old wading through the swimming pool, if you will.
Oh, absolutely. Wading through custard.
Easy pick. So many ways. One of the worst pay-per-view main events then and since. Fucking dreadful. What's our pause then, Callum? What's our most striking visual, should there be one? I managed to get one for this award, amazingly.
So did I. I think we may or may not be I think we might be on the same page with this one. It's the entrance at SummerSlam '94
Yes,
I've gone for.
there we go.
There's nothing. That's the one thing that I, as a wrestling fan of, I not regret, but disappointed not to be able to have seen live. And it's an Undertaker entrance.
Yeah.
As a dead man Undertaker entrance, but slim opportunities this side of the pond. But the Undertaker entrance always excellent.
And it is the only entrance we get on this tape as well. So you have to milk it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad they did it there and not one of the short runways that they have for the Superstars tapings.
Wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can make it a clean sweep with our final award, and that is our overall thoughts on the show. And then I want to see what you're going to give this one. Are you going to give it a yeah, of course. Are you going to give it a buy? Going to give it a rent? Going to give it a bargain bin? Or are you going to give it a wipe? Where does this tape stand?
This was a collection of some of the worst matches of you're trying to highlight a man's career and you put on some of the worst matches the man has ever been in. There was at least two of them had no redeemable qualities whatsoever. The other one was quite short and was the MVP, was the man on the outside. The other one was just because he was in with his pal, but it was far too competitive than it had ever should have been. I have never given a wipe on any of the times I've been on the show, Rory, because I think that every tape that we've seen has always had a redeemable quality that you would at least pick it up at Blockbuster. Or you would one of the ones that it would be in the bargain bin at Blockbuster, where if it's going out of sale, you would get it for £1. But this one's a straight wipe. You could have plenty. You've got your short play tape there. You've got plenty of better uses for it. Just tape right over it.
Yep, cover up the tabs, or take the tabs out, isn't it? See, it's been a long time. Take out the tabs. No, you do cover them up.
No, cover them up. You take them out, and that stops it. That stops it recording. So cover up your tab. Get your sellotape out.
There you go. This is the age of the train. Yeah, you know, you think I would have got that right, but yes, whatever. Just take a sledgehammer to the fucker. There you go. It's not even worth taping over, because the actual spools of tape did have the 54 minutes of Undertaker. He buries them alive on there. Regardless of what you tape over it with, it's always going to be sullied in that respect.
Always been tainted.
So just burn the fucker, quite simply. Yes, this one is very much a wipe, I'm afraid. It came maybe closer to the third tier than you might think, only because whatever you think of them in ring quality, and I hope you think of them pretty much what we did, there is an importance to the SummerSlam 94 and Survivor Series 94 matches, but it's dragged down by B, the other three matches just being anything they could dig out from the back of the sofa, or the back of the casket, if you will, and two, that the importance cannot override that they're pretty bad matches. One, a worthy contender for worst ever. Also, no interviews, nothing from the man itself, and a clearly bored out of his tiny mind Ted DiBiase doing the links inexplicably make this one a wipe, I'm afraid. Yeah, Calum, thanks for coming.
No, thank you. As always, I've thoroughly enjoyed myself talking about some of the content that we've got. What wasn't the best to play with. I can hand on heart say that we've tried harder to talk about it and make this entertaining than they put into making the tape itself 20 odd years ago.
We've got one over on Mr. Locke who said to us in the chat we wouldn't get to an hour.
Yeah, we always find a way. And Stefan Chapuisat certainly put us on our way to that.
It was either him or Alexander Fry was the name I was going to drop.
Oh, no, that is that's a good one. But I'm quite happy that you've plumped for mid 90s and gone with Stefan Chapuisat.
Talk about George Breggy next time you're on. How about that? Can't help ourselves, everybody. Can't help ourselves. Calum, what else have you got going on here on the Place to Be Nation on the Wrestling Network?
Well, recently, I've been public enemy number one in this household recently because we have, in addition to recording this fine show, we've also done the special relations recently, and the Crock and Roll gang are back together. We have. We're going off network, shall we say, because the Peacock haven't put any JCP stuff on, but we're going for before they were Crockett. So Sean has cobbled together. I think this is going to be. He said it was going to be a 4-parter. We are doing 28 matches from 7 for each show from Crockett guys that we've spoken about before they were in Crockett, including, I'll give you a spoiler for the next one, Scott Shiflett is our co-host on that one. He's our 4th horseman on there. So he has gone, he and myself were very opinionated about one of the matches that Billy Graham had. We watched a match with him and Bruno from 1975, so right in Sean's wheelhouse there. It was not good. So give that one a listen when it comes out. I'm not sure when it's dropping, either in relation to this one or in general. I just know it's recorded. It's in the can and ready to go. And other than that, so Crock and Roll will be back every 2 weeks for a couple of months anyway, and then we'll see what happens before the summer. And as always, please subscribe to twitch.tv/Place to Be Nation, where we get our monthly pay-per-view live watches at a minimum. And if you search Place to Be Nation, all one word, on YouTube, you will find the new and improved YouTube channel on there as well. So please give that one a like and subscribe and all those fancy words. Rory, you joined us for WrestleMania Night 1 on Twitch, and it was a great night. So we've got lots of clips on there. Matt Souza has done a great job in clipping everything, or a lot of the good stuff. So go in there and just see what it's all about, and then join us for the next one, which I believe is WrestleMania Backlash at some point in May. So
those words.
Yes, WrestleMania Backlash, Payback in the Bank. So
that
yes.
one might catch on, yeah.
I think so. Oh, WrestleMania Backlash, Bragging Rights, Brand Supremacy. I think that's what that's replacing Survivor Series, I hear.
Too many mentions of bragging rights.
Or not enough.
For WrestleMania Night 1, that was great, and hopefully I will be joining you again before too long for one of the monthly pay-per-view events. So listen out there, everybody.
Yes, you are always welcome, and it's always always a lively debate in the chat, on the call and in the YouTube and Twitch chat boxes as well. So yeah, good times had by all.
Absolutely. So yes, me. Special Relations, month to month here on the network, as Calum has already mentioned. Had a great show there, dropped last week. Do check that one out. And of course, the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Despite being down to just one promotion, we are still very much carrying on. As discussed earlier, we'll be recording our show for April 2001, WWF. Our review of Backlash, one word only, will be part of that too. And as hinted by Calum, there will be some additional programming dropping on that feed. Absolutely not getting rid of the monthly in timeline WWF shows. They will be continuing in perpetuity, as the saying goes. But a couple of little extras here and there dropping every month as well. So just subscribe to the feed wherever you get your podcasts. Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast, very easy to find. And in addition to the month-by-month content, a couple of little extra trinkets and baubles as well. So listen out for that. But Calum, just remains to say thank you one more time for joining me here today.
No, thank you for having me once again, Rory. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Look forward to having you back on again very, very soon indeed, my man.
Oh, anytime.
It will be.
No, anytime I get the call up, I'm always ready to. I'm perpetually warming up on the sideline. Anytime you need me to come on as a super sub, I'm always there. I'm hoping for that starting place one time, but if I'll do my best Ole Gunnar Solskjaer impression and I'm always ready for the call up.
Calum, you were the first name on the team sheet. Don't forget that.
I was. That is correct. I was your. Let's try and think of an obscure person. I was. Oh, let's just go. Let's just go with. I was your Roy Keane. I was the heart of your midfield there.
I'm definitely going to leave that one there, everybody. Just look it up, okay, and draw your own conclusions after that. I'm definitely going to wrap this show now. Callum, cheers once again, my man. I'll have you on again real soon. Check out Senior Video again next month. We've already hinted at the show we're going to be looking at, but that one will be Mr. Ben Locke, the ideas man, if you will be joining us there at the start of June. But I have been Rory McNamara, and Undertaker, he buries them alive. I very much have seen your video. I'll catch you all next month.